What happened to the people who wouldn't become Christians? What happened to the Christians who wouldn't sit down? What happened to the Native Americans that weren't good enough? What happened to the slaves? You see, Abraham Lincoln, when he wanted to free the slaves, he didn't argue that a man would be, that a man who was black was superior. What he did was he argued that you have no right. This is his thesis. He says it's not about black and white. It can really be about anything. He said, if A can prove that he may have the right to enslave B, why may not B snatch the same argument and prove equally that he may enslave A? This is his letter in his own handwriting. But the next paragraph goes on, but you mean that it's not color exactly? You mean that whites are intellectually superior to blacks? Then why can't someone who is intellectually superior to you enslave you? You see, the argument falls apart, and Abe Lincoln knew it. In the 1800s, we have Darwin. And after we freed the slaves, Darwin came about, and he took hatred into a whole new theory. He was only part of it. Darwin's theory of evolution was gaining popularity, and he warned of the consequences of failing to selectively breed. He said, and I quote, if the various checks do not prevent the reckless, the vicious, and otherwise inferior members of society from increasing at a quicker rate than a better class of men, the nation will retrograde. As has occurred too often in the history of the world, we must remember that progress is no invariable rule. So in other words, you're not guaranteed to move forward. Well, now we're breeding people like dogs. And Darwin's theories influenced many, including a guy over in Germany named Friedrich Nietzsche. Nietzsche's most famous for declaring the death of God and believing the world had to be freed from the evils of Judeo-Christian morality. But that would beg the question, of course, if it's not God's morality, then whose morality do we replace it with? He answered, quote, society, as a great trustee of life, is responsible to life itself for every miscarried life. It also has to pay for such lives. Consequently, it ought to prevent them. In numerous cases, society ought to prevent procreation. To this end, it may hold readiness without any regard to descent or rank or spirit. He was saying here that you could restrain people in any way, even deprive them of their freedom in certain circumstances, even castrate them. Well, you take Darwin, you have to help the species along, otherwise we'll go awry. And then Nietzsche, there is no God, and we have to, even if we take them and deprive them of their liberty and freedom, we have to do that because there is no God. This was the trouble that brewed in the 20th century, and it eventually led to the promotion of something called eugenics, Greek meaning good birth. And from 1912 to 1932, 3 international eugenic congresses took place. This is an original copy of a book called Eugenics. It's absolutely horrifying. The purpose of eugenics and these congresses was to investigate how they could improve the human genetic makeup. Which country do you suppose was the first to undertake action? Of course, it's the Progressive Era. Under Progressive President Teddy Roosevelt, he created the National Hereditary Commission, whose mission was to encourage the increase of families of good blood and discourage the vicious elements of the crossbred civilization. Oh. Sterilization laws cropped up. In fact, the first one was passed in Indiana in 1907, where you could just grab a woman or a girl and sterilize her. It's horrible, right? You wouldn't want just girls sterilized, right? Remember that for later in the show. Others followed. The betterment of the race, In Yale, they had a race to get to a better race, if you will. And the whole thing was to get other Americans from their homes and pull them out, deprive them of the ability to have children if they were, stupid or deemed wasteful people, and lock them away in institutions. These actions were likely emboldened because the academic elite were behind the idea. And so they just knew better, right? The greatest minds in America, Yale, arguing that our national vitality depended on a productive citizen. And the best way to ensure that, of course, was through carefully controlled breeding. Well, you can't pick who should marry who and who should have children with whom. You just had to weed out those who shouldn't be breeding with anyone. Yale luminaries founded the Race Betterment Society, among other eugenics propaganda outlets, and eugenics became mainstream in the scientific community. It was a big deal. I'm going to show you a bulletin board at Yale that should scare the dickens out of you. This is from Yale in the early 20th century. It says here, these three little circles there, I don't know if you can make them out, are light bulbs. The first light bulb says this light flashes every 16 seconds. Every 16 seconds, a person is born in the United States. This light flashes every 7.5 minutes. Every 7.5 minutes, a high-grade person is born in the United States and will have the ability to do creative work to be fit for leadership. Only about 4% of all Americans come within this class. Then the top one says this light flashes every 15 seconds. Every 15 seconds, $100 of your money goes for the care of persons with bad heredity, such as insane, the feeble-minded, criminals, and other defectives. Some people are born to be a burden on the rest. Important to remember the Yale Bulletin Board. This takes us to Margaret Sanger, the founder of Planned Parenthood. She lamented the spread of human weeds, the undesirables, as she, according to Sanger, said African Americans were. The full context of the human weeds quote should be seen. She said, Margaret Sanger, quote, colored people are like human weeds and are to be exterminated. The Sanger wanted to engineer people, and she engineered the Negro Project. She said of it, quote, we do not want word to get out that we want to exterminate the Negro population. And the minister is the man who can straighten out that idea if it ever occurs to any of their more rebellious neighbors. She was talking about the African American minister that would play right into their hands, she felt. It should come as no surprise that Margaret Sanger supported the KKK. Yes, maybe she was one of the progressives that wore that outfit behind me. Always, to me, any aroused group was a good group, and therefore I accepted an invitation to talk to the women's branch of the Ku Klux Klan. That's Margaret Sanger saying that. She said the door dims, and the figures parading around with banners illuminated with crosses. She said, but through the end, simple illustrations, I believe I had accomplished my purpose. Dozen so invitations to speak to similar groups were proffered. Isn't that great? Considering it was the intellectual and scientific community and the United States government striving to be at the forefront of eugenics movement, it also should come as no surprise that Nazi Germany, who you may want to recall now, got rid of the world's Jews, or tried to, as part of Hitler's quest to achieve the perfect race, learned everything that the Germans knew from us. Quote, I have studied with great interest the laws of several American states concerning prevention of reproduction. By the way, several American states. All probability they would be of no value or injurious to the racial stock. Here's a brag letter from Germany from Adolf Hitler saying, I just want you to know, I learned this from the United States. Let me show you another brag letter. This one from the leading U.S. eugenics group. I believe they were in California, called the Human Betterment Foundation. They said, you'll be interested to know that your work has played a powerful part in shaping the opinions of a group of intellectuals who are behind Hitler in this epic-making program. Everywhere I sense that their opinions have been tremendously stimulated by American thought, and particularly by the work of the Human Betterment Foundation. I want you, my dear friend, to carry this thought with you for the rest of your life, that you really have jolted into action a great government of 60 million people. I wonder if those in California, the progressive movement, did carry that with them for the rest of their life. This Betterment Foundation, along with other eugenics groups, operated in a close-knit network, publishing racist eugenic newsletters and pseudoscientific journals such as Eugenical News and Eugenics. And they also helped with the propaganda for the Nazis. You see, they were proud that their idea was finally being implemented. So when somebody says, like Hillary Clinton, I'm a proud early 20th century progressive, like Hillary Clinton said in the early days of her election campaign, this is who she's talking about, and you should know that. Now that's quite a charge, to say progressives of the day are like the progressives like these guys. Isn't it? To say they have anything in common is an outrage, unless they do have something in common. And I want to now take you to today and see if you see anything in common. The 20th century progressive. First thing, they deny the authority of God, and they place themselves in the role of the grantor of rights. That comes from Nietzsche. They don't see value in all life. They think that they're better than you. They seek control of all things that are happening to and around you because they know better. Okay, so that's what a progressive does that believes in eugenics. That's what they believe. Let's see if we have anything in common. First, let's start with placing value on life. Well, you know that we're funding Planned Parenthood and everything else, which is Margaret Sanger. But what about this? This came out last week. This is from Salon. So what if abortion ends life? They published an article on abortion daring progressives to take the mask off and stop denying that it's life inside the womb. The author, a progressive author, argued that it is life. So what? We all knew it. We've all known it for a very long time. We just haven't said it. I'd be happy to have an abortion because, she said, quote, all life is not equal. Okay, the next one on the list that they have to have in common if they're going to be like the early eugenicists, they have to have control. Well, progressives have already taken control of health care. On Friday, it was announced that sodas and candy will be gone from schools, but guess what's being made more available? Without your knowledge or your consent, yes, your kids will now have the morning after pill. Bloomberg bans soda and trans fats, but will hand out the abortion pill to our kids. Your kids can't do this, but they can do something else. Wow. Do they believe they're superior to you? Well, watch.
This is what they found. The people in childhood who had the lower IQs wound up being more conservative in adulthood. I'm just saying it's a study.
I think Sarah Palin proved herself to be, I think she's proven herself to be profoundly stupid.
Most conservatives are wildly stupid.
I think people have been reluctant to say Herman Cain is dumb and an idiot like Sarah Palin. We said it about her because they're afraid people, oh, you're just saying that because you're racist. I'm not racist. I think he's dumb. I think he's really dumb.
Rick Perry doesn't have the brains to be president.
Just a final question. Do you think Herman Cain can spell the word Iraq?
Okay, intellectually superior. And remember, the president in his executive order wants to find out if conservatives are dangerous. He wants to find out which groups are dangerous. We also showed you a study last week that came out and said that conservatives are born dangerous. So why the history lesson today? Well, it all goes back again to that Al Gore video, declaring an ideology that I haven't heard since the early 20th century, that what we believe is in our DNA. And while it's generally good to be different, it can get out of hand.